I think Esther's going to talk about a project which is based on her PhD research, which was co-funded with Brooke, and that's quite an interesting model that the agency is in from the beginning, setting the questions, providing the access, and this is a knowledge exchange that's led on from there, but it's a sense of not necessarily what are the implications of the research for practice, but actually building, making the two things merge in a sense. So she's going to talk a bit about that work now.
Great. Just time myself. So hi, yeah, I'm Esther. I'm a research fellow here at CERSI, and I'm going to be talking about what is affectionately known as the Good Sex Project, but its proper title is Good Sex: Building Evidence-Based Practice in Young People's Sexual Health. And it's a one-year ESRC, the Economic and Social Research Council funded project under their knowledge transfer scheme, which is about to be pulled. You're just getting into these before they pull it. And interestingly, they're replacing it with the impact acceleration agenda. And I think the kind of difference between knowledge exchange and impact is kind of maybe something that's interesting to tease out. And what I'm not going to do is talk very much about my research at all, so I'm not going to do really any setting up about anything, and if you think it's a little bit strange that I'm talking about young people and sexual pleasure, then please come and talk to me about it, because I'm not doing the rationale bit. So it's based on my, as Rachel said, this knowledge exchange project is based on my doctoral work, which was a mixed methods study looking at young people's sexual cultures and sexual relationships that was co-funded by Brooke and the Open University. And so I suppose the only rationale bit I will put in is that my doctoral study and this knowledge exchange programme are both based on what is now a well-established body of work from researchers, activists and practitioners that highlights the benefits of using sex-positive approaches to sexual health service delivery and to sex education, and that argues that the current models that we use are over-medicalised, are negative, they focus on the negative outcomes of having sex, unwanted pregnancy, violence and STIs, and don't talk about the kind of the benefits of sexual relationships, and don't use a more holistic, more inclusive and some would argue more empowering model of sexuality to underpin service delivery. So what both of these projects are doing is looking at those arguments and sort of saying, yeah, kind of follow that logic and think those arguments make sense, but what does that mean for practice? What does it mean as a youth worker or a sex educator to go into a classroom or a youth club and talk to a young person about sexual pleasure? So what I did in my PhD study was to ask young people what good sex and what sexual pleasure meant to them. So I did a survey, focus groups and young people and individual in-depth interviews where I asked young people about their sexual values, about what these concepts mean, and I also asked them about their own experiences to find out what these concepts meant in the context of their everyday lives and their kind of intimate relationships. And the focus of this new project is to kind of use those insights and use those findings from the PhD research to create resources for Brooke to use. So there's the thesis, which I expect probably will only be read by about 5 people ever, although anyone is welcome to. It's 344 pages long. But the idea of this project is that whilst I think that the research has lots of insights for practice, I wouldn't expect a practitioner or a young person to sit down and read my thesis, or anyone for that, except my examiners. So the aim of this project is to create resources and support for Brooke, and one of the insights that came out from my PhD research, which was both interested in looking at sexual values and sexual cultures, but also exploring the methodological possibilities for researching and talking about what is a sensitive topic with young people. One of the insights was that yes, it is possible in all kinds of different contexts to have these kinds of conversations with young people, that they're highly emotional, highly charged, highly contested, and that if we're going to ask practitioners to do this kind of work, we need to make sure that they have the resources to do it, the training and the institutional support. And it's the idea that the Pleasure Project is kind of a project for social change. It's calling for a more feminist or a more inclusive kind of model of sexuality, and that we can't front load that onto practitioners to do all of that work without providing them with the kind of necessary institutional and arguably kind of political support as well. So the planned project has a kind of a number of intended outputs. which are 3 films created with and for young people, practitioners and the general public. a one-day training program for practitioners, which kind of uses the films and supports their work around pleasure and adopting sex-positive approaches, and also yet to do a module for Brooks' online staff induction, which focuses on pleasure. An online literature review, which I will write, that's kind of accessible for practitioners as a kind of resource that they can use to support their work. Because when I did my PhD research, when I spoke to practitioners and when I did a survey of practitioners, they were really enthusiastic and really kind of behind this project and think that talking about pleasure is really important. But they were really concerned about the kind of backlash from parents, from governors, from the Daily Mail. And so I think that having some sort of evidence base that practitioners can refer to is really important. And again, so that all the kind of onus isn't on the practitioner to do what people are arguing is innovative and politically sensitive work. And my argument would say that you can't expect the kind of youth worker to be the one who's carrying responsibility for that. There's also a blog which both documents the kind of practices and processes of knowledge exchange that we're engaging in, and also is currently where the very much work in development resources are being kind of piloted and shared. So those are kind of outline of the outputs, and what I want to do today, and how much time have I got left? Okay. So what I wanted to do was to kind of share one of those resources with you, which is one of the films that we've made so far, which has come out of what for me has been the most challenging and potentially most interesting area of the project, which is about reanimating data for different audiences. So we're really lucky that as part of the kind of budgeting of this project, we've got a documentary filmmaker working with me throughout the year. And one of the things that we're doing is working with groups of young people to work with the raw data to try and animate it to make films that young people, practitioners and the general public might want to watch. And we held a workshop over the summer with the filmmaker, theatre practitioners and some young people, and we made 4 films, 2 that reanimated survey data, which are largely seen as being successful, and 2 which animated interview data, which are largely seen as being not quite so successful. So I'm just going to, I haven't really got time to talk about why, although I think that's probably actually the most interesting thing, because I think, well, all I will say very briefly is that there's kind of two reasons. One is to do with the challenge of finding images to go along with sexual stories, and I think that really speaks to the kind of the contradictory ways in which sex is visualised and hidden in contemporary culture. But it's also to do with what can be said in a research context compared to what can be said in an educational space. And what I'm finding this week, for example, because I just started a new 7-week project in Brixton with a group of young people, is that some of the things that can be said in research, when you take them out of a research context and put them into a kind of participatory youth or an education context, they become deeply troubling, even though they might be what my research and other research suggests fairly normal, very much part of early and everyday sexual experience. They are kind of, both the young people and the practitioners I'm working with are kind of quite horrified that I might want to have these stories heard. And I think these are kind of that's like when you're getting to what knowledge exchange is and what are some of the kind of real tensions of trying to do it. And I think one of the reasons why animating survey data has been much more straightforward is because the data in itself is not so emotional, it's not so sticky, it's not so complicated. It's much more kind of, I asked on the survey, I said, please complete the following statement: good sex is, bad sex is. And so I have 200, nearly 300 different definitions of good sex and bad sex, which are fascinating and contradictory, but not nearly as difficult as a young woman describing her first sexual experience as unwanted, not wanted, she's not really sure, he wasn't even sure if it was sex in the first place. But back to the survey film, so I think I've only got 1 minute.
Just show it quickly.
Okay.